It was supposed to be a normal dinner, just like any other. I walked into the house, my heels clicking on the floor, only to be hit by a rush of emotions when I saw him. He was sitting at the dinner table grinning, like everything was perfectly fine. But there she was, standing next to him, his pregnant girlfriend, her hand resting on her rounded belly. My heart stopped for a moment, and my mind went into a frenzy. I barely recognized the man sitting in front of me. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd just smile, pretend everything was normal, like he hadn't been betraying me for months. But the truth came out in the worst way possible. I could feel my body go cold as the reality set in. All those whispers behind my back, all the little lies, it all came crashing down in that single moment. He looked at me with those eyes that used to make my heart race, but now they only made me sick. "You're back early," he said, trying to play it off like it was nothing. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, hollow laugh. "Yeah," I replied, "a little earlier than you expected." His gaze flickered to the woman beside him, then back to me. I saw the panic start to build in his eyes, but I refused to give him the satisfaction of my reaction. I watched as they both sat there, smug, as though they were in control of the situation. But I wasn't about to let him think I was weak. No, this time I wasn't going to cry in silence. He had broken me first, but now it was my turn to show him that the truth wasn't something he could hide anymore. The silence between us was deafening, and yet it was filled with so much unsaid. I had so many questions, so many emotions swirling inside me, but none of them would find a voice. Not right now. I had something far more powerful than words. My silence was my answer. I thought about all those nights I had spent alone, wondering where he was, who he was with, and why I was never good enough for him. But now, it was clear. I was nothing to him. I had been a convenient distraction, a placeholder until someone else came along, but I wouldn't stay in this lie any longer. "Why don't you go ahead and tell me everything, Marcus?" I said, my voice icy, steady. I wasn't angry. I was beyond that now. He was caught, and he knew it. There was no more pretending, no more half-truths. The room felt suffocating. I could see the panic in his face, and I knew then that he never saw this coming. He thought he could keep me in the dark, that I wouldn't find the messages, the phone calls, the little things he thought I would overlook. But I saw it all. I found the messages, the evidence, everything. In that moment, something shifted inside of me. The woman who had once been unsure, who had cried in silence for too long, was gone. She finally left, and in her place stood someone stronger, someone who had had enough. Enough of the lies, enough of the deceit, enough of being invisible. Wasn't the same person anymore, and he was about to learn the hard way. I wasn't going to stay quiet. This was far from over. The air in the room felt thick with tension. Marcus walked in, his face flushed with rage, but the sight of me sitting there calm and collected threw him off. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by an unsettling sense of vulnerability. The truth was out, and there was no escaping it now. I had nothing left to hide, but he had everything to lose. "You're making a huge mistake," he spat, his voice shaking with anger. "You think you can just walk away from everything we built?" But I could barely even bring myself to respond. My silence spoke louder than any words I could have said. He begged me to listen, but there was nothing left to hear. "You really thought I'd just sit by and let you destroy everything?" I said, the words cutting through the air like a blade. He froze, clearly stunned that I wasn't crumbling before him. What did he expect? That I would beg him to stay? That I would still be the same woman who once depended on him? No, not anymore. I had found my strength. For months, I had swallowed my feelings, convinced myself that I could somehow ignore the betrayal, that I could forgive him. But now, there was no going back. I had already seen everything. He never thought I would find out, that I would piece it all together. But I did, and it was all in front of me now. All the lies, all the stolen moments. I had them all. "Don't you get it?" I asked, my voice steady, almost emotionless. "You betrayed me, and I'm not just going to forgive you. Not this time. I found the proof, Marcus. I found it all." I slid the papers across the table toward him. The divorce papers, the legal papers, the financial papers, the proof that he had been lying to me for far too long. The look in his eyes shifted from anger to panic. "You wouldn't dare," he said, his voice cracking, but I could see the desperation creeping in. He knew I had him cornered. There was no way out for him now. He had thought I would stay, that I would put up with his deceitful ways, but he was wrong, and he never saw it coming. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed to show him the truth. The truth came out, and it hit him like a ton of bricks. He broke me first, but now I was the one holding the power. I wasn't the victim anymore, and he had no idea what was coming next. "You think this is over?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "This is just the beginning. You'll see. You'll see what happens when you push someone too far." For the first time, Marcus looked small, like a man who had been stripped of everything he thought he had. Power, control, his family. I watched as his confidence melted away, replaced by a man who was now completely exposed. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. I watched him as he tried to compose himself, desperately attempting to regain some control over the situation, but it was already too late. The truth was out, and the papers were right there in front of him. There was no denying it now. "You think you can just walk away from all of this?" he asked, his voice trembling with panic. But I wasn't shaken. "Marcus," I said, my voice low yet firm, "this is bigger than you think. You've made a choice, and now I'm making mine." I let those words sink in for a moment before continuing. "I'm done playing by your rules. This is no longer about us. It's about protecting what's mine, and you've crossed a line that you can never come back from." The weight of my words hung in the air between us, thick with finality. For a moment, he just stared at me, unsure of what to say. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the calculations, the excuses he was preparing, but I wasn't giving him the chance. I wasn't going to allow him to manipulate me any longer. "These are the terms," I said, sliding the documents toward him. "If you don't sign, you'll regret it, but not as much as I will if I don't make this clear now." He stared down at the papers, his hands trembling. I could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that things were about to spiral out of his control. He thought he could get away with it all, that I'd be the same woman who would forgive and forget, but I wasn't. Not anymore. "If you don't sign these, I'll take everything," I said, my voice cold, unwavering, "and I'll make sure the charges for embezzlement stick. You won't just lose me, Marcus. You'll lose everything. Your reputation, your future, your business, everything you've worked for. It will be gone." The ultimatum wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. He had pushed me too far, and now I was taking control. I could see his mind racing, trying to figure out a way out of this mess. But the reality was, there was no way out for him. His betrayal had left me no other choice. I was done being his doormat. I had already endured too much. I was no longer the woman who would sit in silence, swallowing his lies. This time, I was taking action. "You really think I'll let you walk away without consequences?" I asked, my voice sharp. "You've hurt me, Marcus. You've broken every promise you ever made, and now you're going to pay for it." The words were like a slow burn, each one landing with purpose. He didn't have an answer. He couldn't. Not anymore. His desperation grew, his pleading becoming more frantic. "Please, just think about this," he begged. "We can work something out." But there was no working anything out. The damage was done. There was nothing left to salvage. His words meant nothing to me now. "I'm done thinking," I said. "The truth came out, and now it's over." I stood up slowly, gathering my things. I didn't need to say anything else. The papers were signed, the decision made. Marcus would be left with nothing but his own regrets. And as I walked away, I knew it wasn't just about the money or the business. It was about me taking back control of my life, something I should have done long ago. I watched him crumble before me, the man who once had everything, the power, the wealth, the status. It all seemed so distant now, like it was never truly his to begin with. "You don't get it, do you?" I asked him, my tone calm, but carrying the weight of everything that had happened. "This isn't just about what you lost. This is about everything you did to get to this point." Marcus stood there, his face pale, his shoulders slumped as though the weight of reality had finally hit him. His eyes darted from the papers on the table to me, then back again. "I had no choice," he muttered, but his words were hollow. He had always believed he could manipulate every situation, spin every lie, and make everything work out in his favor. But that illusion was gone. The truth had caught up with him. I wasn't angry anymore. At this point, I was numb. His betrayal had cut deep, but the pain had faded into something far stronger. Resolve. I knew what I had to do. There was no turning back now. "You thought I would stay," I said quietly, almost pityingly. "But I'm not the woman you used to know. You broke me first, Marcus. And now, I'm walking away. This is your reality now." He took a shaky step toward me, his hand reaching out as though he could somehow fix everything with a gesture. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking. "You don't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." His desperation was palpable, but I wasn't moved. It was too late for apologies, too late for excuses. "You never saw it coming," I said, finally meeting his eyes with unwavering certainty. "This is where your lies have brought you." The silence between us was thick, heavy with everything unsaid. He was lost, adrift in a sea of his own making, and I realized just how much power I had taken back, not just from him, but from myself. I wasn't the woman who cried in silence anymore. I wasn't the woman who let herself be deceived. I was strong, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. "I'm done being the victim," I continued, my voice gaining strength with every word. "You thought I would stay, that I would keep swallowing your lies, but you were wrong. I'm better than that. And now, you'll have to face the consequences of your actions." I saw him flinch at my words, but I didn't feel sorry for him. I had come too far to go back. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that his world was collapsing. The empire he thought he controlled, the life he believed was his, was slipping away from his grasp. "This is the end, Marcus," I said, watching as the last remnants of his confidence faded. You made your bed. Now, you'll have to lie in it. Opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. Save your breath, I said coldly. There's nothing left for you here. I walked past him, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. There was a part of me that once loved him, but that part was buried now, replaced by something stronger, a sense of self that could never be shaken again. As I closed the door, behind me, I couldn't help but feel the weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. There's something incredibly freeing about shedding the weight of toxic relationships. I never expected that the hardest part of leaving would be the people I thought I could count on the most. But here I was, surrounded by new faces, and yet it felt more like home than I ever had before. Vanessa and I had come a long way, and what had started as a betrayal now had the potential to bloom into something unexpected, a partnership of sorts. Are you sure you're ready for this? Vanessa asked, her voice steady but filled with a hint of vulnerability. We were standing on the balcony of my new place, watching the city lights twinkle below us. It felt like the perfect moment to reflect, to make sense of everything that had happened. I turned to her, meeting her gaze, and nodded. Ready for what? I replied, a slight smile tugging at my lips. To move forward, together. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us. There was so much to consider. Vanessa had her own life to rebuild, and I had mine. But in the midst of it all, we realized something. We didn't have to do this alone. That was the real gift we'd been given, the chance to start fresh, but not in isolation. As much as Marcus had tried to tear us apart, in the end, his actions had brought us closer together. I don't want this to be just about the business, Vanessa said, her tone softening as she reached for my hand. I want our kids to know each other, to have something real to hold on to. I want them to see that even when everything falls apart, there's always a chance to build something better. Her words struck me hard, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the heaviness of the past truly lifting. I had been so consumed with my own pain, so lost in what had been done to me, that I forgot there was more to life than vengeance and survival. There was love, and there was the future, our children's future. I'll help you, I promised her, squeezing her hand. I'll support you, however you need it. We'll make sure this stays in the family, our family. And for the first time, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like I was fighting for something that would only be taken from me. This was ours, and nothing could change that. Vanessa smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude passing over her face. Thank you, she said quietly. I didn't think I could trust anyone again, but you've proven me wrong. There was something about that moment, standing side by side with her, that felt like a turning point, not just for us, but for everything we were going to build. There was so much we could do, and the possibilities felt endless. I had learned so much about myself in the past few months. My silence had been my answer, my way of dealing with the overwhelming noise of betrayal. But now, my voice was louder than ever, and it felt good. And as we moved forward, I knew that no matter what Marcus tried to throw our way, we were ready. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving. We were building something stronger than anything he could have ever imagined. I never thought I'd reach this point, to be honest. When I first found out about the affair, when the world as I knew it was crumbling around me, I couldn't imagine any kind of peaceful ending. It felt like the hurt would never go away, that the pain would always follow me, lurking in every corner. But there I was, sitting in my living room, watching Vanessa pack her things, and instead of feeling bitter, I felt calm. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly, but her eyes were steady. This is the right choice for you? I looked at her, watching her carefully fold the clothes into a suitcase, and for a moment, I was struck by how much she had changed. She had become someone I never thought I'd be able to rely on. In the midst of all the chaos, she had shown up when I needed her the most. And now, as she was leaving, there was no animosity between us, just respect, understanding, and oddly enough, gratitude. I said, smiling softly. This is what's best for us. You've got your future in Hong Kong, and I've got mine here. We both have a chance to rebuild, and that's all we need. She nodded, her eyes flickering with emotion. I never thought we'd be in this position, she confessed, but I'm glad we are. I'm glad we found a way to make it work, even after everything. The truth was, this was never about revenge for me. Venge. That was a fleeting thought, something I'd let myself entertain in the heat of the moment. What really mattered was peace, not for Marcus, but for me. I needed to reclaim my life, my purpose, my peace, and I needed to let go of the weight that had been dragging me down for far too long. I'll always be here for you, I promised her. You know that, right? I know, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I'll never forget what you've done for me, Rebecca. As she closed the door behind her, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't consumed by bitterness. I had reached closure, and it felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The years of betrayal, of heartbreak, had led me to this moment, where I could look at my life and finally feel in control again. The future was mine to shape, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even Marcus, take that away from me. Looking out of the window, I watched as the world carried on, oblivious to the storm that had passed through my life. It felt freeing. It felt like a new beginning. And as I walked away from that chapter, I knew this was the final step. There was no turning back now. I had faced the worst, and now I was ready to embrace the best. It's been 3 months since everything changed. 3 months since I became the person I never thought I'd be. The person who took control, who stopped waiting for permission, who decided her own fate. I can still remember the day when I walked into the office for the first time as the interim CEO. The weight on my shoulders was immense, but I stood tall. There was no more fear, no more hesitation. It was my time to lead. People were nervous. They didn't know what to expect. Not from me, not from anyone. After all, I wasn't the one they expected to step up. Marcus had been their leader, the patriarch of the Sterling family. Now it was me, a woman, no less, stepping into a role that nobody thought I could fill. But I wasn't here to prove them wrong. I was here to prove to myself that I was capable of anything I set my mind to. The first decision I made was to restructure the company. I had no interest in just following the same old ways. That wasn't who I was anymore. I knew I had to do something radical to shake things up, to bring the company into the future. Sustainability, inclusion, mentorship. Those were the pillars I built Sterling on from day one. I wanted it to be a place where people felt valued, not just for their position, but for their potential. I was no longer in the shadows, no longer the second in command. I was the one calling the shots now. I remember the first meeting with the board, how they watched me with skepticism at first, waiting for me to falter, but I didn't. I stood my ground, and as the meeting went on, I saw their respect for me slowly shift. It wasn't instantaneous, but I felt it in the room. I wasn't the little girl they used to know. I was their equal now. Sophie and Samuel were two of the loudest voices in support of the changes. They had always been my secret allies, but now, they were stepping up in ways that were impossible to ignore. They saw the vision, they saw the potential, and they believed in the future we could create together. It felt powerful to have them on my side. The more I worked alongside them, the more I realized how much I had been holding myself back before. All those years of doubting my own worth, of thinking I wasn't enough. Vanessa's success in Hong Kong was the icing on the cake. She had taken the challenge head on, and the joint venture she led was thriving. I couldn't help but smile when I heard the news. She was doing exactly what I had always hoped for her, succeeding on her own terms. Our partnership, though unconventional, had proven to be stronger than I could have ever imagined. And I was proud of her, truly. Things weren't easy though. I had to keep pushing. I couldn't afford to slow down, to get comfortable. There were always new challenges, new people trying to undermine me. But each time someone tried to bring me down, I rose higher. Every time someone questioned my authority, I proved them wrong. It became a game of endurance, of perseverance, and I was determined to win. The power dynamics in Sterling had shifted, and I was the one in control now. The board knew it, the employees knew it, and most importantly, Marcus knew it. There was no more pretending, no more playing games. The truth was out there, and now I had the power to shape the company, to lead it to a future that felt right, that felt aligned with my values. I didn't just want to lead, I wanted to change the game. I wanted to redefine what leadership meant, especially for women in business. I wanted to create a legacy, not just for me, but for everyone who came after me. I wanted people to look at Sterling and think, that's a company that values people. That's a company that cares. And so, I kept pushing forward. I didn't look back. The person I was before, the woman who doubted herself, was long gone. She was replaced by a force of nature, a woman who was ready to take on the world. When Vanessa left for Hong Kong, it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I knew she was capable, and I knew she had everything she needed to thrive in that role. But as I watched her settle into the project, I realized something else too. This wasn't just a business venture for her. This was her chance to rewrite her own story, away from the shadows of family expectations. She had the power to build something completely new, something entirely her own. I could see the difference in the way she approached things. In Hong Kong, she wasn't carrying the same baggage I had when I started. She wasn't constrained by the legacy of Sterling or by the weight of her family's history. She was free to make her own decisions, to shape her own future. And honestly, it was inspiring to watch. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about living authentically, about leading with integrity and vision. As the months passed, the impact of the Hong Kong venture became undeniable. Vanessa's leadership was exactly what Sterling needed. A fresh perspective, a modern approach. The joint venture became a huge success, bringing in profits and opportunities I had never imagined. But more than that, it began to change the perception of the Sterling name. We weren't just a family business anymore. We were a global force, one that was willing to adapt, evolve, and embrace new cultures and new ideas. I remember the first time I visited Hong Kong to see how things were going. When I walked into the office, I couldn't help but smile. It was everything I had hoped for. The team was diverse, the energy was contagious, and the ideas were flowing. Vanessa had created a space where creativity thrived, where people felt empowered to take risks and challenge the status quo. It was exactly the kind of environment I had wanted for Sterling all along. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this was just the beginning. Vanessa's success wasn't just a win for her, it was a win for all of us. It was proof that when we let go of old beliefs, when we stop trying to fit into boxes that were never meant for us, we can create something truly transformative. She had done that, and I knew I had to keep pushing for that same level of innovation here, but there was still so much work to do. The corporate world was changing fast, and Sterling had to keep up. I started implementing new initiatives at home, things like mentorship programs, diversity training, and sustainable business practices. It wasn't just about profits anymore. It was about creating a culture that valued people, that believed in their potential, no matter where they came from or what their background was. The truth was, I didn't want to just be known for running a successful company. I wanted to be known for running a company that made a difference. That was my vision for Sterling, to not only leave a legacy in the business world, but to change the way people thought about leadership, success, and family. I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself. And Vanessa, she was living proof that this new vision was possible. She wasn't bound by the same limitations we had been. She was changing the game, leading with purpose and authenticity. Watching her succeed was like watching a flower bloom. It was beautiful, it was powerful, and it made everything we had worked for feel worth it. I couldn't help but feel proud of what we had accomplished together. But more than that, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Grateful for the lessons I had learned, for the strength I had found, and for the way our family had evolved. We were no longer bound by the past. We were creating our own future, one that was filled with possibility and promise. It's funny how life can turn around when you least expect it. 3 months ago, I was still carrying the weight of everything, the family drama, the corporate challenges, the pressure to keep it all together. And now, here I was, standing in front of a room full of people, about to be named the permanent CEO of Sterling. The announcement felt surreal, but it also felt like the final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. I never imagined I'd be standing here today. If you'd told me a year ago that I would be in charge of one of the most influential companies in the world, I probably would have laughed in your face. But now, looking around at the faces of the board members, at the team that had rallied behind me, I knew that this was my moment. It was the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and sometimes pain. The ceremony was simple but powerful. As I stood at the podium, I couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had fought so hard to get here, and I knew that I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for everyone who had been there with me, who had believed in me, even when it seemed like the world was against us. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for everyone who had stood by my side. But as I looked around, I also knew that this victory wasn't just about climbing to the top. It was about redefining what leadership meant. It was about creating a company that wasn't driven by power or legacy, but by purpose and values. That's what I had set out to do from the very beginning, to make Sterling a company that was built on integrity, inclusion, and sustainability. I knew that being CEO wasn't just about making decisions. It was about making the right decisions, ones that aligned with the company's new vision. And it wasn't just about me anymore. I thought about Vanessa and the role she had played in all of this. She had shown me what it meant to lead with heart, to embrace change, and to think outside the box. She had proven that we didn't have to follow the same old rules, that we could build something new, something better. And as I looked at the people in that room, I knew I had the support I needed to continue on this path. There was still work to do, though. Being named CEO wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. I had to make sure that the culture we were building at Sterling was sustainable, that it would continue to grow and evolve. It wasn't enough to be successful. We had to make sure that success was grounded in the right values. I also knew that the world was watching. There was a lot at stake, and the pressure was only going to increase. But I wasn't afraid of that pressure. If anything, it fueled me. I had already overcome so much, and this was just another challenge I was ready to face head on. I wasn't going to let the fear of failure stop me from moving forward. The next step was to introduce the Sterling Legacy Trust, a new governance structure that would ensure ethical leadership and inclusion for all descendants. including Vanessa's son. It was a bold move, but it was the right one. I wanted to create a company that didn't just focus on profit, but on the people who made it all possible. The Legacy Trust would ensure that everyone had a seat at the table, that leadership was about more than just bloodlines. As the night went on, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. I had come so far, and yet I knew that there was so much more ahead. I wasn't just celebrating a promotion, I was celebrating the future of Sterling, of our family, and of a new era of leadership. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something much bigger. When I look back at everything I've been through, it's hard to believe how far I've come. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was struggling to find my place in this world, unsure of who I was or where I was going. And now, I'm here, standing at the helm of Sterling, a company that once felt so out of reach, a company that I've redefined from the ground up. But this wasn't just about me. It was about something much bigger. It was about redefining the very idea of what it means to leave a legacy. For so long, the Sterling name had been synonymous with power, entitlement, and tradition. But I was determined to change that. I wasn't going to let the past define us. Instead, I wanted to create a legacy that was based on merit, on values, on what truly mattered. That's why the Sterling Legacy Trust was so important. It wasn't just a financial structure, it was a symbol of everything I had fought for: inclusion, transparency, and accountability. It was a way of ensuring that leadership wasn't about bloodlines or connections, but about the people who were willing to put in the work, who were willing to make a difference. And it was a way of honoring Vanessa's son, ensuring that he too would have a place in this new world we were building. As I stood in front of the board, as I looked out at the room full of people who had once doubted me, I felt a sense of pride. This wasn't just about changing the company, it was about changing the entire culture. It was about showing the world that we could do things differently, that we could build something that was bigger than ourselves. It wasn't going to be easy, of course. There would be pushback, resistance. People didn't like change, especially when it threatened their position of power. But I had already proven that I wasn't afraid of a challenge. I had already proven that I was willing to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. And I was ready to do it again. I thought about the times when I had felt so small, so insignificant, when I had believed that I was nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. But now, I knew the truth. I wasn't a pawn. I was the queen. And just like that, the game had changed. No longer would the Sterling name be a symbol of entitlement. Now, it would be a symbol of strength, resilience, and empowerment. This new legacy wasn't just about what I had achieved. It was about the future we were creating, a future where everyone had a chance to succeed, where merit and values mattered more than family connections. It was about creating a world where leadership wasn't defined by who your father was, but by who you were and what you stood for. I thought about the generations to come. I thought about how different things would be for them. They wouldn't have to fight the same battles I fought. They wouldn't have to prove themselves over and over again. They would be part of a company, a family, that valued them for who they were, not for their bloodline. And in that moment, I realized something important. This was never just about business. It was about creating a new way of thinking, a new way of living. It was about showing the world that legacy isn't just something you inherit. It's something you create, and that's exactly what I had done. As I looked out at the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning. We had so much more to accomplish, so much more to build, but for the first time in my life, I felt at peace with where I was. I had redefined my legacy. I had redefined what it meant to lead, and I was ready to continue that journey, for myself, for my family, and for the future of Sterling.